Down this alley, on the land that had belonged to Roger Sherman, first mayor of New Haven and framer of the U.S. Constitution, stood a theater that seated 2,000 for multiple shows a day after day, for well over 100 years. It was an opera house, a theater known for pre-Broadway premieres, vaudeville, burlesque, and finally, a movie house. Abolitionist Frederick Douglass gave a public address at the Hyperion, and the crowd clapped and cheered for 2 minutes afterwards. Another night, an ovation was earned by gifted elocutionist Ednora Nahar, who would go on to become one of the first female African-American managers. At Yale's bicentennial celebration, Booker T. Washington, Teddy Roosevelt, and Mark Twain were all on stage together to receive honorary doctorates. These tales barely scratch the surface of the historical treasures buried here. Although the theater was demolished in 1998, as more stories are added to the Hyperion New Haven timeline, the vanished theater begins to reemerge. Look not mournfully into the past, it cometh not back again. Wisely improve the present, it is thine. Go forth to meet the future without fear and with a manly heart. The motto verse of Longfellow's Hyperion.
It was right in the back here, on the parking lot. There was no parking lot here when I started working here.
Wow.
Did you ever go in there? Hyperion Theater. It was already closed. It was never in service. So they decided to destroy it in 1999. And what happened on the night of Halloween, the wall that was the closest to us collapsed, and it was higher than this building. So it collapsed on top of this building, and we got flooded. So it was like major.
Onto this building?
Through the roof
oh
of
my
this
God.
building, broke all the sprinkler pipe and everything. Yeah, so we had to close for like 3 months.
Oh my God, 3 months.
And it was funny because it was the night of Halloween.
This is what the Hyperion Theater, which was originally known as Carl's Opera House, looks like today. It's just a parking lot. The theater itself collapsed in 1999. It was constructed in 1880 by Peter R. Carl, who was an ex-U.S. Marshal. In 1877, multiple newspapers reported that Mr. Carl had probably been fatally injured falling during the construction of the building, but he persevered. Before I get too much into any details, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Arthur Mullen, and my first job in life was as a dishwasher at the Union League Club of Chicago, where I found a room full of Civil War relics and a machine with tiny ball bearings that could polish any silver item. That's me. And this is the Union League Club of New Haven, now called the Union League Cafe, where I work as the dinner host. By looking into the history of the building where I work, I have found a window into the history of the city of New Haven. One day I overheard one of the servers telling a table that there used to be an opera house in our backyard. And then I realized that the name of the alley, the Hyperion Court, was commemorating the former entrance to this theater, Carl's Opera House, later called the Hyperion. The plot of land appears on the map of 1641, one of the earliest recorded maps in the history of the New Haven colony, and was known as the Richard Platt Lot. In 1761, 120 years later, the property was sold to Roger Sherman. The residence built and occupied by that distinguished patriot, statesman, and squire was completed in 1770. Within its walls preceding the Revolution were held many discussions as to the best manner of meeting the impending difficulties with their mother country, and here doubtless were considered the outlines of various articles, the substance of which at length appeared in the United States Constitution, of which Roger Sherman was one of the framers. In this house, too, General Washington was entertained while on his way to take command of the American Army around Boston. In 1779, at the British invasion, Roger Sherman's house was among the first to be entered and ransacked by the Redcoats, who appropriated every portable article of value in the building. Roger Sherman, with Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Philip Livingston, were the committee appointed in 1776, June, to draft the Declaration of Independence. Sherman was therefore one of the 5 fathers of our Union. New Haven's Republican League Club was founded in 1884 for the purpose of providing a social organization for men who stood by the principles of the Republican Party that maintained the Union in the divisive decades following the Civil War. The Republican League was a progressive social club and featured speakers such as civil rights leader Frederick Douglass and first African-American U.S. Ambassador Ebenezer Bassett. In 1903, coinciding with the completion of a beautiful, commodious new Beaux Arts addition by architect Richard Williams, the club changed its name to the Union League, became primarily social, and welcomed folks from whatsoever politics to membership. In New Haven, A Guide to Architecture and Urban Design, Elizabeth Mills Brown wrote of the Union League Club, another dignified, well-made building, its design distinguished by a clean-cut layering of brick planes, the sort of an undemonstrative but cultivated architecture that gives urbanity to city streets. Behind the clubhouse addition, what remains of the Italianate mansion by architect Henry Austin for Gaius Fenn Warner, finished in 1860, originally with a double bow front. No photograph exists, so I created a facsimile from another Henry Austin house and a picture of Warner Hall. Music at Yale took an unexpected turn in the spring of 1884. The Glee Club staged a benefit show on behalf of the Yale Navy. This was put on at Carl's Opera House, and a local professional banjoist was invited to participate as a special attraction. 8 of the best banjo and guitar pupils from the college were chosen to participate, and the curtain rose on Yale's first ever banjo club. I find this stuff just very compelling. I remember one day I was reading about President Taft being chosen by the Republican State Convention held at the Hyperion, and I glance over on the same page of this newspaper is the news of the Titanic sinking, and with more lifeboats, only the ship would have sunk, not the people, but the people, of course, are being depicted in this image, and I was just astonished. Dutch historian Johan Huizinga has said the basis of all historical work is our perpetual astonishment that the past was once a living reality. The Hyperion Theater, located just across the Yale campus on Chapel Street, was another place where Ives found the freedom to try out some of his more adventuresome pieces. At Yale, Charles Ives was in a secret society called Hebole. The society met regularly on Friday evenings at The Spot, a rooftop garden atop a dry goods store on Chapel Street, which it rented out for its carryings-on. They had bacchanalian 7-course feast, accompanied by a succession of sherry, sauterne, and champagne, with a break in the middle between the roast beef with mushroom sauce and the native broiled spring chicken with lettuce mayonnaise, for Roman punch and cigarettes, all topped off with Neapolitan ice cream, strawberries, and cigars. Charles Ives had a reputation amongst his classmates for his habitual, high-spirited practice of leading the group off on a vigorous 2-mile hike to catch the sunrise at the top of East Rock after an all-night session at the Spot. I feel very fortunate to be coming into the timeline at the place where I am, working for a really great group of people that have now had a restaurant continuously operating at 1032 Chapel Street for the first time in its history. The Union League Cafe has been going strong for 25 years.
Of Union League, the sign outside.
Yeah.
The sign outside, yeah.
That can be fun.
No, the sign outside.
The historical marker?
Did you walk here, Teddy? In front of the sign?
Yes, yes, the light was going to be fantastic. It's going to be wonderful.
Like unaware or you see this? Maybe?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Oh, pretty good start.
Jean-Michel and Jean-Pierre are working with their younger partners, Guillaume and Roman, to ensure that the next 25 years are just as delicious at 1032 Chapel Street. The city of New Haven has revealed some of its most surprising stories through my research into the building. For example, I was walking by Louis' Lunch every day on my way to work, thinking, look, there is where the hamburger was invented in America. There was where the first hamburger was ever sold and served and consumed. In fact, the original location where the Temple Street parking garage now stands would have been the end had not Louis Lasson arranged for the entire restaurant to be put on the back of a truck and moved to its new home on Crown Street. This led to learning about Paul Rudolph, who designed the Temple Street garage, as well as neighboring buildings such as the Yale Art and Architecture Building. I read about Louis Icahn, who designed the Yale University Art Gallery, as well as the Yale Center for British Arts. I read about how Roger Sherman had been exhumed from his original burial place on the New Haven Green, and his remains were reburied at Grove Street Cemetery. Architect Henry Austin designed the gate in an Egyptian revival style. Over the massive pylons at the entrance, the words, "The dead shall be raised," testify to the ancient yearning for a life beyond the grave. The lines on Roger Sherman's monument read, "He was a man of approved integrity, a cool, discerning judge, a prudent, sagacious politician, a true, faithful, and firm patriot. The gates will close, and we leave the honored dead to their eternal peace in the midst of that city which they blessed by their lives." Despite his age, Frederick Douglass campaigned vigorously for Benjamin Harrison during the 1888 presidential campaign. After weeks spent in Indiana and Michigan, Douglass arrived in New Haven, Connecticut for a major address on October 25, 1888. There was so much excitement in the city that crowds gathered at the railroad station to witness Douglass's arrival. After a reception at the rooms of the Republican League, Douglass was escorted to the Hyperion Theater by a local Republican club and bands. Upon entering the hall, Douglass received a standing ovation from the large audience. Douglass said, in part, "Parties are to be judged by the old rule, by their fruits. Judge a party by what it has been. Judge it by its antecedents. When Moses wanted to know God, he showed him all that had gone before. The past is the parent of the present. Every wheel leaves its print upon the soil, so every party leaves behind it something by which we may judge. It is not pleasant for Democrats to have us refer to that past. They say, dead issues. That party has always been on the wrong side of everything. They said the Negro could not be civilized and made men of in God's world. Well, we have made men of them in this world, and we are proud of them. They said you could never put down the rebellion, reconstruct the states, or pay the national debt, but we have done all of these things. You will never make soldiers of the Negroes, they said, but we did make soldiers of them. Men of New England, when you came to the battlefields of the South, the black men were your friends. They furnished guides to your soldiers who escaped from the dungeons of Andersonville and Salisbury. They fed the boys in blue and fought for the freedom of this country. When Abraham Lincoln called for help to hold aloft the banner of the Union, the black men answered, full 200,000 strong. In that address, Frederick Douglass told of the conversation he'd had with Abraham Lincoln when Lincoln expressed great interest in and sympathy for the colored people. He said he knew what to do with regard to every nationality except the Negro. Douglass replied, "Give us our freedom and the same protection of the law as you give the other nationalities, and we will do for ourselves." The applause was deafening for 2 minutes after Mr. Douglass ceased speaking. The audience did not rush out of the Hyperion as it usually did after a 3-hour sitting, but many lingered long to catch one last fleeting glimpse or grasp the hand of the noted orator.
Alright, so, big boy. There's so many pictures of the building, it's insane.
Are you serious? Don't get me too excited, because I still have to leave at some point.
Man, you have no idea, I'm never gonna find it.
My research is just beginning, and I'm excited to find what is uncoverable. Dang, cool, right? Oh my god.
You might want to get closer so you get some of the...
Oh, sorry, go.
So I'm going to do these shoes. I've been with me for a long time.
Oh, I stomped on your shoe, I'm so sorry. Dang, look at that.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Herringbone.
Herringbone, that's what
Yeah.
that's called?
Yep, herringbone pattern. It's just like that. And look, you see right there? It's so old it starts to undulate a little bit, so you have to put this board on top of it.
Dang, man.
Isn't that cool?
Wow, thank you so much, James. You made my whole day. Back at the old Roger Sherman house. A tour guide with special glasses, allowing the wearer to see backwards in time, stands at the now invisible entrance. Welcome to the Hyperion, stories from a vanished theater.
Where they go like forward, they have a time machine, but they can only go forward. So they mess up and go way too far forward. So they go, okay, let's just go to the end. And so they do, and then it starts over again.
So they can go back to the spot.
Yeah, but then they pass it again. Then they go back.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Like the Parabox.
Parabox?
Yeah. It's a box that contains an unlimited amount of dimensions. So you jump into it and go